Hey IED, Mr. Catlin here, and we're continuing our video series. After part two, we're starting part three, and we are going to add the eye holes on the bottom of your car, and we're also going to talk about putting the cavity in the back for your power plant where the CO2 cartridge is going to go. All right, but before I get started on those, just a real quick thing. I'm not going to build this because it takes some time, and I think you guys can handle it. But if you don't like this space in between your wheel and your body where the axle is running and you've got a lot of excess space, you have a couple of options. We can snip the length of your axle to make it a little closer to your body, or you can build spacers, just little cylinders that the axle goes through that fills this gap, and so there's no wobble between your tires and the body. If you want to do that, just make sure that the inside diameter is the same as this hole, and the outside diameter of that tube should probably be the same as that circle. So if you do that, it should slide right on the axle and fill that gap and not give you any wobble. All right. And I think you guys can handle that. And you can build a new part for that. Call it spacer or something like that. Maybe spacer for the front, spacers for the back, however you want to go about that. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to work a little bit on the body. And on the bottom of the body of your car, we're going to build the cavities for the eye holes. Now, I'm going to build a little cavity only because if you build eye holes, and what I found, and I think I don't have an example of it, if I put little extensions on the bottom of this, it's really going to mess up how this thing prints, and we're going to have supports, and I think you're just going to be in worse shape. So we're just going to build little cavities where we can print off a separate part and glue it to the bottom. And you'll kind of get the idea as I go along. So here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. We're going to start by a sketch on the bottom of your car. All right. And we're going to do that normal. And on this sketch, we're just going to start with a construction line that runs midpoint to midpoint along the bottom. All right. And that's going to help us because that's where we want our eye holes to be. Now they have to be 150 millimeters apart. So we'll get to that here in a second. But we're just going to start with the idea of a center point rectangle on the line, one here. And we're also going to need one down here that'll be the same exact size here in a second. Make sure you're not getting that constraint from the other side. Just make it a wonky size, and that's okay. I'm going to dimension it, and this is really important because it needs to be a little wider than what we're going to make our eye hole pieces. 5.5 millimeters. And this way we're also going to be 5.5 millimeters. Okay, so it's going to be a pretty small cavity, and you can do that on this side as well. So 5.5 millimeters and 5.5 millimeters. Okay, so we've got our sketch. Now we want to make that a small cavity in the bottom of our shape. But before we do that, well, let's make sure that the distance between these two things from, we'll go center to center, needs to be at least 150 millimeters, right? Now, it could be more, it could be less. And now at this point, you could grab one and they would slide together and you can kind of put them where you want on your part. Now, you could obviously get them further apart. And in fact, if you look, you might want to put them on the outside of your axle depending on where your axle is. So this could get wider apart. Maybe you want it to be 170 millimeters, right? And then you're going to grab one of those and move it where it's, where you want it. And you can constrain that by doing dimensions, but it's up to you, okay? So play around with that, get them where you want them. As long as they're within that constraint of 150 millimeters, you should be fine, okay? So the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to be done with that sketch. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to extrude this section and this section, but I don't want an additional. I want to remove, and I want to go in a depth of 3 millimeters, okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to give us a little bitty cavity on the bottom that shouldn't affect anything else that we can insert our eye holes that we're about to create, okay? So we're going to come down here. We're going to make a new part in the Part Studio. This new part, I'm going to go ahead and rename it. This is going to be your eye hole. So this is the eye hole for the fishing string that's going to run through the bottom of your car. Okay, so there we are. Start a new sketch. Go to the top surface, and let's view that normal. And it's going to be a very basic design. Okay, so I'm going to do it as a center point rectangle around my origin. All right, and I need it to be 8 millimeters tall, and I need it to be 5 millimeters wide. It's going to look really small. We'll zoom in on it here. That's the shape that we're going for. Okay, and I am going to draw a little construction line from the center down and make that 2.5 millimeters, so I can kind of get a center point for my next drawing, which is a circle. And we're going to make a circle here, and we're going to make that 3 millimeters for the fishing line to go through. That's the general shape of your eye hole. Okay, now it's 5 millimeters this way, and we need it to fit in a 5.5 by 5.5 millimeter cavity, so we need to make sure that we extrude it that depth as well. So let's go ahead and extrude it a depth of new material that is 5 millimeters. All right, and that should, oh, I forgot to select, let's go back to it. I forgot to select the face that we wanted to extrude, which is this. All right, and it's going to create our shape here that we want. It's 5 millimeters in depth. There we go. All right, so we've got our, I like the idea of filleting the sides just to kind of make it a little sharper, right? Looks a little bit neater. And I think I did that with a radius of 1 millimeter as my fillet. All right, so there we go. We've got our eye hole piece. We've got the cavity that this should fit in the back. And when you assemble that, what you can do is you can come into your assembly, insert your eye hole. You're going to have 2 of those, right? And the way we're going to do this is we're going to print these separately, and then we'll just use some super glue and just glue them to the bottom of this. That way we don't have this little part sticking out the bottom that's going to just mess up us printing these in our slicer. All right, so we'll just get a little fasten mate, like we're going to glue these suckers down. So the center of that, and then we'll go to the center of this. It's there. And you might have to twist it around if it doesn't go in there, right? Oh, actually, let me go back to my connector. On the wrong side, right? So whenever that connected, it was, actually I'll delete this one. Go back to 5. I think it went in reverse. Yeah, it went on the other side, so we want to flip that. There we go. And if it's not going the right way for the string, you might have to do a little bit of rotation with that button, right? That's what we want. Okay. So you see how there's a little bit of a gap on the sides. That's good because things don't always print the right size, and we can fill that gap in with glue. All right. So let's fasten the other one. Okay. So here, and then on the bottom of this one, and voila, we can flip that around. We can spin it, and we're in good shape. All right. So that's what it's going to look like after it's printed, but I like the idea of a cavity, print separate, and glue option, just so it'll be easier for us when we print, and we'll talk about that more in our slides video. Okay? One last thing that I want to show you on this video is your cavity on the back of your car for the CO2 cartridge. All right, so let's get straight to that. So for that one, we're going to go back to our body part. We got cavities for the hose on the bottom, and we're also going to have a cavity in the back for the CO2 cartridge. And that's going to be another sketch, you guessed it, on the back surface. And we probably want this thing to be as centered as possible. So whenever you do your sketch, I'm going to view it normal, right? And just so you're kind of aware where everything is, the bottom's on the right, okay? So I'm going to get a midpoint, come over, get another midpoint, right? Center it. That needs to be 20 millimeters or 19 millimeters, somewhere in that range, I believe is what you want. And then the depth of that has to be a removal, right? We're going to remove. And the depth removal for our power plant, for our CO2 cartridge, is, I believe, anywhere between 45 and 55 millimeters. So I'm going to go 50 just for this video, but you know that you have a little bit of wiggle room there if you want to take more or less. All right, and that should give you a cavity for your CO2 cartridge. Now you have to make sure there is at least a 5 millimeter safety zone on each side of this. So if you go to view this normal and you look at this sketch right here, you should be able to dimension how far is it from there to there. from the edge of that circle to the edge of this. I guess you can probably click there to there. Yeah. And that needs to be at least 5 millimeters from here to here, also from this distance to this distance. So you check those things as you build, but you'll have your cavity in the back. And so when you look at it in the assembly, you'll see it has the hole in the back, which you want, and that'll be where the CO2 cartridge will go. If you want to fillet that, that would probably be just fine on the body. You fillet the edges of that just to give it a little bit of a ease that into it some more, and that would be fine. But that's how you make the cavity. That's how you make your eye holes on the bottom. And I talked a little bit about spacers, which you can add as another part and include in your assembly if you want to. But that's the end of this video, part 3. And I think we'll have one more video where we talk about how we're going to lay this out to print. But other than that, you're on your own customizing. Good luck, guys. See ya.